Hey, good evening, brothers. What's up, Facebook? If you're watching the replay, what's up to you too? This is Tuesday Thoughts with Mike, your mentor, and I appreciate you guys being here for tonight's topic because it's definitely a very important one. If you're new to this page, quick give you a rundown on my story. I grew up without a father. I went through a lot of tough things that I've shared on this page that you can find in videos past in growing up, in my young adulthood, then in my marriage, and in my life. And I found myself asking the question, why was someone like me able to do something with their life? If you had two people born into a similar situation, why is one person going to go wayward and not do anything with the potential that they have inside of them, and why is someone else going to overcome and work through those things? In thinking on this, God revealed two things to me. The first one was, by His grace, right? By His grace, I'm alive today. By His grace, I woke up. My heart still beats, and my lungs still breathe air without even me having to think. And the second thing is mentors. Mentors played a huge role in my life, on the books I read and in the men that came alongside me, whether it was coaches, whether it was dads of friends, who saw something in me and refused to let me settle for less. I think of a story. I don't think I've shared this before, but I was in high school. I think I was in the ninth grade, and I had come a long way, or maybe I was going into the 10th grade, and I had come a long way from being horrible at basketball when I was in 8th grade, and I kind of got a little bit prideful, and there was somebody who was a year older than me, so they were a junior, and I thought that I was better than them, and that I should be on varsity. If they were going to be on varsity, I was like, I definitely should be on varsity. And we would have open gyms during the summer, and this particular person who shall not be named was kind of, from my perspective, was kind of a pain at times. Maybe a little bit whiny and selfish, and we had it out, right? And the athletic director just happened to be there that day, and he got pretty mad at me, and he called me, or he told me to come with him, and he took me into his office, and he sat me down, and he was real with me, extremely real, and he told me, or he posited this question to me, which was, what am I going to tell coaches when they come around here to see you play? Or what? No, he said, what kind of person am I going to tell coaches you are when they come around here to see you play? And then he went on to say that he knew that his son wasn't the easiest to get along with, but I had potential, and if I didn't get my act together in school and on the court, that I was going to waste all that. And that moment was a little bit of a light bulb for me. And he recognized that in me, and he called that out of me, and he challenged me and held me to a higher standard. I thank God that I recognized that and was willing to think about that and make a decision for myself. Was he just another adult trying to bring me down and ruin what I had going on, or was he really being real with me and causing and helping me to think about the bigger picture, which he was. So that's what this page is all about, taking those seeds that were planted in me, those lessons that I've learned, hard lessons at times along the way, and sharing them with other men, because stuff is going crazy in the world. I meet with men constantly all the time whose marriages are on the rocks, whose relationship with their children or with someone else in their life is falling apart, who have, like me, bought into the idea that life is supposed to be one way, and if you just work hard and you sacrifice all these things around you, one day you'll get that reward. And the reality is when you do get that reward, there won't be anyone to share it with you, because you'll have lost all those relationships along the way. Not to mention how getting there will leave you unsatisfied. Right? It's about that journey. So this page is just not to tell anybody what to do, but just to share my experience, because you can't argue with somebody's testimony, and wisdom is wisdom. There is no arguing with it. It either fits or it doesn't. You either understand it or you don't. And I don't say that boastfully, because there was a lot of stuff that I didn't understand for a lot of years, that people tried to share with me, and I had to go through some hard things to learn that. So without further ado, we're going to jump into tonight, which is Tuesday Thoughts. And the thought for tonight is, would you let your daughter date you? And that's a scary proposition. That's a scary question. Some men have to ask themselves and have to face. Just before we jumped on here, I was doing some work, and my daughter earlier had asked me to wrestle, and I told her no, I was too busy. And as I was doing my work, God spoke to me and was like, what's that all about? Like, he just reminded me, you're not, one day you're not going to have the opportunity to wrestle with your daughter. You're not going to have the opportunity to speak her love language. That's part of her love language, is that kind of attention. And he's like, I want you to go over there and play with her. And I was like, I got so much stuff to do. I got to get this stuff done. I'm behind. And I had a choice at that time whether I could be disobedient or obedient. And it took me probably a good 20 minutes before I decided that I was going to listen and go wrestle with my daughter. But I say all that too because it's a reminder, right? The way that we treat our daughters and the way that we treat our wives is how our daughters will form opinions about how men are supposed to treat women. And I don't care about, I shouldn't say I don't care. There's all kinds of things out in the world that say these things, different forms of feminism, different radical beliefs, right, about men. But the truth is that position is a position of honor that we hold in our families, right? Whether it's our relationship with our wife or whether it's our relationship with our daughter. And if we don't realize the magnitude of that, how fortunate we are, and the honor that goes in that, we're fools. Right? And I don't mean to put anybody down, but if you're having a hard time making that connection and you don't see that, brother, I want to encourage you to wake up, right? Because how we live in our house is how our kids will live out in the world. And back to our daughters, even if you don't have a daughter, or maybe you're not tracking with me here, think about this. Think back to when you were dating, right? And you would go over you'd go to pick your date up, right? Maybe you go to her house, and if you had any, I guess, sense of respect or self-respect, you'd get out of your car and you'd go up to the door, ring the doorbell. Maybe mom would answer, maybe dad would answer. If that was your first time meeting them, you'd come in and hopefully, you'd show them honor and respect by speaking with them and sharing some stuff about yourself with them. And in that moment, right, they're trusting you with their prized possession, which is their daughter. For you to take out and go on a date and do God knows what, no stones, guilty, right here, with their daughter, right? They're expecting you to honor them and respect them. Now, I don't, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily naive, but I would say that they're hoping that you're making the right decisions, right? And that their daughter's making the right decisions. Now, that was a huge honor for them to do that. Now, fast forward, how do you want that person who comes over to your house to pick your daughter up one day and to take her out to treat her? Maybe you weren't honorable to these girlfriends throughout your life growing up. I know at times I wasn't. Do you want that to happen to your daughter? So the relationship that a father plays in his daughter's life cannot be overstated. And now, yesterday, if you weren't with us, I shared some resources for men, and one of them was this book, John Eldredge, Wild at Heart. And I just want to read to you guys some things out of here, because there's a chapter in here, and it's called A Beauty to Rescue, right? And it's all about the wounds that can be inflicted on a woman as she grows up for a multitude of reasons. And as men, how we play into that dynamic. So let me see. So listen to this, right? A little girl looks to her father to know. Wait, hold on. Okay, sorry. Got ahead of myself. Every woman can tell you about her wound. Some came with violence, others came with neglect. Just as every little boy is asking one question, every little girl is as well. But her question isn't so much about her strengths. No, the deep cry of a little girl's heart is, "Am I lovely?" Every woman needs to know that she is exquisite and exotic and chosen. This is core to her identity, the way she bears the image of God. Will you pursue me? Do you delight in me? Will you fight for me? And like every little boy, she has taken a wound as well. The wound strikes right at the core of her heart, of beauty, and leaves a devastating message with it. No, you're not beautiful, and no one will really fight for you. Like your wound, hers almost always comes at the hand of her father. A little girl looks to her father to know if she is lovely. The power he has to cripple or to bless is just as significant to her as it is to his son. If he's a violent man, he may defile her verbally or sexually. If her father is passive, a little girl will suffer a silent abandonment. But when a woman never hears she's worth fighting for, she comes to believe that's the sort of treatment she deserves. And then he finishes, this section off by saying, the number one problem between men and their women is that we men, when asked to truly fight for her, hesitate. We are still seeking to save ourselves. We have forgotten the deep pleasure of spilling our life for one another. I wanted to look like the night, but I didn't want to bleed like one. So maybe that was a little bit of the extra there. But do you hear the message in that, right? Do you hear how important our relationship is with our daughters, and how we as men, as fathers, set the tone for them for what could be inexplicably the rest of their lives, right? And the relationships that they have with men moving forward. So, Tuesday Thoughts is where we talk about subjects that are important to us being husbands and to us being fathers. And I can't really think of anything other than marriage that is more important than our relationship that we have with our children, whether it's our sons and in this case, our daughters. Um, so I would just encourage you uh, at the end of this to think about your relationship with your daughter. And it doesn't matter, if your daughter's, 8 like mine, or if you're older and your daughter's 38. I know older men that have cried and wept because their daughters haven't wanted anything to do with them. You know what? In fact, I'm going to share this story. I think I was 15 or 16 years old, and yeah, 16, and I left my house and I wasn't going back. And that's a different story for another time. But I went to live with my grandparents full time, and that caused a lot of hurt and a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of angst, and it drove a wedge between my mom and my grandpa. So much to the fact that, and I don't think it was just this one thing, but maybe it was the tipping point, that my mom didn't speak to my grandpa for a long time. I want to say it was like almost 5 years. Uh, so this started out where this rift and resentment grew. And my mom, in my family before my grandpa passed away, everyone would go over there for Christmas, Thanksgiving, maybe Easter, all the big holidays, all the cousins, uncles, aunts, right? My grandpa was the patriarch of our family, and my mom would come, and at first, she wouldn't even go in the same room with my grandpa. If he tried to approach her and tried to talk to her, give her a hug, whatever the case may be, she wouldn't say anything. She would just walk into another room. And if he followed her there, she'd walk into another room, right? She totally just ignored him like he didn't even exist. And, he'd sit out in the barn, and I'd come out there after school, and he'd be crying, and I'd ask him, what was wrong, and man, he would just be so broken about the relationship that he had at my mom, and he would ask me, what I thought and how he could restore that relationship, uh, you know, um, and I don't. It was totally God, but I just told him, you can't force someone to love you or to reconcile. They have to come back to you on their own. There's nothing you can do. We can't control people, and it's ironic that I had to be reminded of that later on in my life and in my marriage when things were going wrong. But I digress. So that second year, right? Then my mom would come to events, and she could say hi to my grandpa, but that was it. Still couldn't be in the same room with him. She'd acknowledge him, she'd say hi, but that was it. No affection, no kisses, no hugs, none of that. And then the third year got to be where she would say hi, and then she would be in the same room. And then the fourth year, she would say hi, she would be in the same room, and maybe she would give my grandpa a hug. And in the fifth year, it was finally that relationship was restored. But me and my grandpa must have had easily 24 talks over that 5 years about what he could do to win my mother's love back, and how much he loved my mom. And he would think back to when she was a little girl on the things that they would do together. And I'm not a fool. Uh, I'm I know that there's some woundedness there that my grandpa caused my mom growing up, I don't know to what extent. I don't know what details. I mean, that's for them to know. But I guess the lesson in that is, how important that relationship is, right? This foundation that we have with our daughters that sets the stage for the way that they live out their lives, and they value relationships with men in the way that they approach that, right? In the what type of husband do you want your daughter to marry? Do you want her to marry someone like you? Can you say that? Or do you want her to marry someone that's completely different than you? I don't know. That's for you to answer. So that's it for tonight's Tuesday Thoughts. I encourage you, brothers, to think about that. If you don't got it, got to get this, man. Change your life. Change your world. It'll give you permission to be a man. To think and to say things that you haven't thought about or said in a long time. So I love you guys. I hope you have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow for Wednesday Wisdom. Have a good night.